Eevee Community Day is coming up soon, and Umbreon is getting Psychic as a Community Day exclusive charge move. And this is a pretty big deal for Umbreon because it is kind of like a meta-defining Pokemon, and this move is a little bit of a meta-defining move because now Umbreon has a way to clap back against opposing fighting and poison type Pokemon that would otherwise beat Umbreon. Is this move better than Last Resort? I wouldn't say it's outright better, but it does have advantages over Last Resort. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the differences between Psychic and Last Resort Umbreon. I'll also be covering the Great League IV spreads for Umbreon. Surprise, surprise, you know, the rank 1, really freaking good, but there are attack and defense breakpoints to be had. And then also I'll be talking about Ultra League Umbreon's IVs, the minimum IVs you can go for on Umbreon before you're too bad. Like, we all know the hundo's the ideal here, but what if you don't have the hundo? I'll help you decide which one is better. And then also all of this information, including IV spread information on Sylveon and Vaporeon, will be included in a Game Press article, link in the description when that Game Press article is up. It should be coming up in the next day or two, and unlike the Diggersby article, I actually wrote this one. The key to actually doing something is to do it ahead of time. So the article's already written, so it is actually coming. And also talk about Sylveon and Vaporeon too, so hype. When it comes to the Last Resort versus Psychic debate, it's actually pretty simple. Last Resort allows you to hit opposing Dark-type Pokemon. If you don't have Last Resort and you're locked into a Dark-type matchup, maybe you're locked into the Umbreon mirror, you're gonna absolutely get shredded in that matchup should you not have Last Resort. So Last Resort, very important for the Dark-type matchup. When it comes to Psychic, Psychic allows you to have a little bit of counterplay against Poison and Fighting type Pokemon. With the Poison type buff, Poison types can now counter Umbreon, and with Psychic, Umbreon's able to bite back, so that's a pretty big deal there. And then when it comes to Fighting types, Umbreon's not exactly able to flip those matchups 100% of the time by using Psychic, but Psychic definitely gives Umbreon a lot more threat against them that Umbreon didn't have before. So Psychic, also a really big brain idea. So at the end of the day, if you're building Umbreon for Great League, you're probably going to want to have two Umbreons, one to go with Foul Play and Last Resort, and one to go with Foul Play and Psychic, because they kind of do different things. The main meat of Umbreon, the bread and butter, is going to be the Foul Play. So Foul Play, the most important move for Umbreon. The other move is going to be the contingency move. So do you expect to get stuck against Dark-type Pokemon? Go with Last Resort. Do you expect to try to get countered by, you know, like Poison and Fighting type Pokemon? Go for Psychic. But at the end of the day, Foul Play is probably the big ticket item. There is also that third option. If you're trying to be big brain, you could go for the double legacy moveset and go with Last Resort and Psychic. And in doing so, you could counter opposing Dark-type Pokemon while also biting and fighting against Fighting and Poison type Pokemon there. Problem is that you're now lacking Foul Play. So as a result, there's a lot of like neutral matchups that you're now going to lose consistency in, which overall hurts Umbreon in a pretty big way, I'd say, overall. And then on top of that, you lose your ability to hit Steel-type Pokemon. You have no neutral hits against Steel-type Pokemon. You only have resisted hits against Steel-type Pokemon. So the third move set, you know, the double legacy, definitely has some risks associated with it. That said, if you're pretty big brain about PvP, or if you're in like a limited type format, that double legacy moveset could have an advantage, so it could be worthwhile to build a third Umbreon. Maybe don't, you know, elite TM it right away, but kind of have it waiting in the back, just in case you want that forbidden double legacy moveset in the future. When it comes to Ultra League Umbreon, Psychic does have those conferred benefits up in the Ultra League, but given the current state of the Ultra League, I feel like Last Resort Umbreon is significantly better than Psychic Umbreon compared to what it's like in the Great League. So yay Umbreon Day. If you want to use, you know, Ultra League Umbreon, you still probably want to use Last Resort. At the end of the day though, if you're bringing Psychic to the Ultra League, it's not that big of a deal. But you know, if you run into another Umbreon, it's going to be a huge deal because you're going to get your butt whooped. So now, with that out of the way, let's get into the real reason why you're here. The Umbreon IV spreads for the Great League. In general, I'd have to say the rank 1 and the rank 2 are the two best Umbreon overall in a general sense, all things considered. If you're curious, the rank 2 is the same stats as the rank 1. It's just an empty HP IV, so they have the same stats. But I'd say overall those two are the best. That said, if you don't have the rank 1 or the rank 2, or if you've already built the rank 1, you may want to consider a defense-weighted Umbreon, because there are some interesting advantages that a defense-weighted Umbreon can have in the Great League. And then if you don't have the rank 1 or 2, and after the community day you can't build the rank 1 or the rank 2, and you need to pick something else, then you're going to want to pick one of these defense-weighted Umbreons. Because of the way Umbreon works, defense has a greater value for it than HP does. So if you drop your HP and you got the higher defense for it, I'd say that'd be better than doing the alternative, because Umbreon's going to be tanking so many different charge moves that it's like getting 1 extra damage per charge move is going to overtake whatever HP advantage you're going for. On top of that, attack weight can also have some pretty interesting implications for Umbreon as well, and you naturally get this slight attack weight by going for a more defense-weighted Umbreon, so they complement each other. So if you want to do cool things with a defense-weighted Umbreon and you want to do cool things with an attack-weighted Umbreon, you can do them at the same time, no problem. Now if you need something a little bit more concrete than this whimsy defense is better than HP for Umbreon nonsense, look at the Shadow Machamp matchup. When it comes to the rank 1 Shadow Machamp, which has a 134.4 attack stat, which also has a shadow boost, if you have a 178.98 defense stat, so a bit higher than the rank 1's defense stat, you can get a defense breakpoint on that counter damage, which means that in the 1-0 shield scenario, you're using a shield, Shadow Machamp isn't using a shield, you can actually KO them because they don't KO you down with that counter damage. But to be honest, when it comes to that 178.98 attack stat versus, the top 50 of Shadow Machamps, only 4% of Shadow Machamps have that low of an attack stat. So you may want to titrate it a little bit up further to a 179.74 defense stat. With that defense stat, compared to the top 50 rank Machamps, you're covering about 38% of them, which is a bigger number than 4% by a lot. So having that bigger defense weight can be pretty significant. The maximum defense that Umbreon can get is from the 0-13-0. I think that's a 180.32 defense stat. Maybe it's a bit higher than that. At any rate, that covers about 72% of all Machamps, I believe, in the top 50 of Machamps. So it is a bit more consistent there. That all said, Machamps that fall out of the top 50 range of Machamps are going to have even higher attack stats, so it is possible to miss that defense stat. But if you are up against somebody who is an IV snob and they have the rank 1 Shadow Machamp, well then I guess you'll be teaching them a lesson here by having a slightly higher defense weight. On top of that, having a higher defense weight can confer an advantage against Sableye. You already dominate Sableye, but in the 1-2 shield scenario specifically, if you have a higher defense weight against, most Sableye, that cleans up that matchup for you even more against, the purified return Sableye. Having that greater defense can better secure the 1-2 shield situation. So you spend 1 shield, and poor little Sableye spends 2 shield trying to overcome Umbreon. They can't do it, or their window of opportunity to do it is much more narrow because you have that higher defense stat. And then on a similar note, the higher defense stat can also help you in the 2-2 shield scenario against Shadow Victreebel. The range of attack is, I think, a bit more narrow than it is for Shadow Machamp, but if somebody does have that super low attack, super IV snob, Shadow Victreebel, well then you can show them a lesson by having that higher defense stat Umbreon. Once again, I want to clarify that the Shadow Machamp, the Sableye, the Shadow Victreebel, these aren't goals with the higher defense stat. They're just extra stuff you can do with the higher defense stat. In general, for Umbreon, higher defense is better than higher HP, outside of going for like the rank 1 or rank 2. These are just 3 specific examples of how that can more concretely help you out in even situations. When it comes to the higher attack stat on Umbreon, and once again I want to clarify a slightly different attack weight on the Umbreon, not a big massive attack change on the Umbreon, you can get an attack breakpoint on Vigoroth, which I think is pretty crazy. And the more I looked into it, the more consistent this attack breakpoint can be. So what does this attack breakpoint mean for Vigoroth, well, it means that you can now overcome it in the 2-1 shield scenario where you couldn't otherwise. And that is a specific shield scenario. It doesn't always come up like that 100% of the time, but as you can imagine, having any sort of breakpoint with Umbreon on another Pokemon can confer advantages in more uneven scenarios as well. So I thought that was pretty cool, you know, bullying the Vigoroth there. When it comes to the rank 1 Vigoroth, you only need like a 88.54 attack stat. For reference here, the rank 1 has a 88.27 attack stat, and the rank 5. So just ever so slightly different rank from the rank 1, just a little bit less stat product than the rank 1. You hit 88.97. So you for sure get that. And if you do bring the attack stat up even higher, perhaps an 89.86 attack stat, only 2 of the top 50 Vigoroth can avoid it, and none of the Vigoroth in the top 25 can avoid it. So this isn't like a big earth-shattering thing for the Vigoroth matchup. I mean, it can enable the 2-1 on Vigoroth, but it's just like that nice little extra spice to your Umbreon. So if you're building multiple Umbreon, you already have the rank 1 Umbreon built, then why not get a couple interesting advantages by going for a slightly higher defense, and as a result of going for higher defense, a slightly higher attack Umbreon. Am I right? Also, one goofy thing I don't want swept under the rug is a slight attack weight can also help out against the Melmetal matchup. So if you have a slightly higher attack stat on your Umbreon than like the rank 1, for instance, after Melmetal uses superpower, it changes your snarl damage from 4 to 5. And in a vacuum sealed situation, that can get you the win in the 1-1 shield scenario, because without changing that damage to 5, Melmetal can do double superpower at the end, and in this vacuum sealed situation, by changing that damage to 5, you clip it from reaching the second superpower, like right at the end there. Super frustrating for the Melmetal player. So just a little interesting thing there. And then for uneven situations on the Umbreon, obviously, you know, if they superpowered earlier, well, now you're doing more damage to them sooner, which can also confer advantages. So what are the IV spreads on Umbreon, the most optimal ones? I feel like if you're going to shoot for any sort of IV spread on Umbreon, you're going to want to go with the ones that I've featured here. So we do have the rank 1, we do have the rank 2. I feel like these two are kind of like the definitive, like you definitely want to build at least one of these. And then we have the defense and the attack weighted Umbreon here. Now when it comes to the defense weights, I highlighted with light green on the defense for the ones that have general consistency for the Shadow Machamp situation. And then the bolded green one there is you know, the maximum defense, the most consistent for the Shadow Machamp situation. And then when it comes to the attack stat here has pretty good consistency against most Vigoroth, but the highlighted ones have like that pinnacle. Like none of the top 25 Vigoroth are going to be avoiding this attack stat. So if you want to have like supremo consistency, then go for these ones. But any of the attack weights here, aside from the rank 1 and the rank 2, are going to have really good consistency for pissing off Vigoroth. If you had to highlight one as being the most unique Umbreon to build opposed to the rank 1, so like, you know, the best non-rank 1 Umbreon, the rank 88 is probably the most interesting because it has that maximum Machamp consistency and it also has the maximum Vigoroth consistency. It doesn't matter that you drop all that HP going for the 0-13-0 because you really do make up for most of it with your defense stat, and then you have those general interesting matchup advantages that are conferred by having the higher attack stat and the higher bulk. Now if you don't have the rank 1 or the rank 2 and you don't have the defense weighted, you know, Umbreon sets here, well, these are other IV spreads out of the top 25 that I feel are also very, very good. Basically favoring defense. I have like a hard defense cutoff here of like 176.5 or something like that. And then I also highlighted ones that have the attack checkoff for Vigoroth too. So, you know, high defense, I would favor high defense over higher HP. But yeah, these sets are also very, very good. So if you don't have the sets on the left, the sets on the right are very, very good. And then if you don't have any of these sets and you have anything in like the top 25 that I don't have highlighted here, those are also good too. They're not bad Umbreon sets. I just build these ones before I build anything else when it comes to Umbreon. So just stuff to think about when it comes to your choice making for which Umbreons to evolve for the Great League. Now when it comes to Ultra League Umbreon, we all know that the Hundo's the best, right? The level 51 best buddy Hundo Umbreon is still hitting under 2,500 CP, so obviously you want to go with the Hundo. That said, you might be tight on Stardust and you have a lucky traded Eevee that, you know, it's not 15, 15, 15, but it's oh so close. Should I build that one? What are the minimum cutoffs? I don't have the Hundo Ryan Swag. What works in the Ultra League for Umbreon if it's not the Hundo? And I'd have to say the bare minimum, the lowest I would personally go on a Ultra League Umbreon would be the 14, 14, 13. Anything like higher in the IVs than that, phenomenal. But I would not want to go lower than a 14 attack IV. I would not want to go lower than a 14 defense IV. And then I guess unless you had like the 15, 15, I wouldn't want to go lower than a 13. Like 15, 15, 12, probably fine. When I dove into this information, I really wasn't expecting the attack IV to be that big of a deal, but it ended up being a pretty big deal here. I found that in a lot of situations, the 13 attack IV on the best buddy Umbreon had a lot of very important breakpoints that you didn't want to miss, and then the 14 attack IV also had a pretty big handful of matchups that you could end up losing if you don't have the 14 attack IV on the best buddy Umbreon. So as a result, I made a judgment call. If you're really thrifting here, if you've got no other options, 13 attack could be okay, but I'd never want to go for a 12 attack personally. Then when it comes to the defense is also more important than HP for a Pokemon like Umbreon. That is also very true in the Ultra League for Umbreon as well. So it's like I really don't want to drop too much defense here. There's a lot of Pokemon that can creep on Umbreon's defense stat if you drop too low. Like there's a lot of Pokemon I've covered in the past where it's like they just miss it. And then I think I've even made the comment like, oh, and if they're thrifting on their defense, well then they're going to be the fool because you're going to get the break point. You want to avoid that happening. So I feel like 14, I really wouldn't want to ever go lower than 14. And then when it comes to HP is kind of a dump stat for Umbreon. Unfortunately, in the Ultra League here, it doesn't appear that there's any empty HP stats for Umbreon. So like each HP IV does matter for Umbreon, but it's not as important as the attack and the defense are. So you can go down to 13. And if you had to make the extreme cut here, if you have like the lucky 15, 15, 12, I think that's like perfectly acceptable if you're okay personally without going with the Hundo. I know some people out there are feeling like, oh, Ryan Swag, you're being too much of a snob. It doesn't matter. You can have a 0 attack stat. And like, I guess maybe I am being too much of a snob, but it's so expensive to build these level 50 XL Pokemon. I really don't want you to get stuck with having to build twice once you do start realizing how much a lower attack stat can hold you back. So I'm just trying to save you some Stardust and save you some time here. If you feel comfortable thrifting even harder on the IVs, that's on you. If I'm going to be recommending something to someone though, 14, 14, 13, probably the 15, 14, 13 is as low as I'd personally go for building Ultra League Umbreon. So that about wraps it up for the PvP IV deep dive on the Umbreon here. I hope you learned something new in regards to defense weighted Umbreon in the Great League and the bare minimum cutoffs for Umbreon in the Ultra League. And then of course I do have Sylveon content coming up in the future, and I may be doing the Vaporeon video. I might not have time for the Vaporeon video, but at any rate, if you do want to learn about Umbreon, Sylveon, and Vaporeon, they're all going to be covered in the article on GamePress. It should be out tomorrow or the next day. I already wrote the article, so it is actually going to be out this time, unlike the Diggersby one. So link in the description when that comes up, and it'll cover all the information in this video and all the information on Sylveon and all the information on Vaporeon. And of course, if you have any questions on this content, comment below, let me know what's up, and I'll be happy to help you out. And if you enjoyed this content and you want to see more like it, make sure to subscribe to SwagTips. SwagTips. I'd also like to give a special shout out to these Patreon supporters. If you want to support Swagman on Patreon, link in the description. Also, just so it doesn't get swept under the rug here, Dark Pulse can have some advantages over Foul Play as the Dark type charge move for Umbreon, but that's a personal choice, man. You gotta really know what you're doing if you're making that kind of choice, and the matchup differences are so annoyingly intricate that I'll probably never get into it with you guys unless there's like a limited format where Dark Pulse is having a big advantage. So just use Foul Play. Don't worry about it too much. And if you notice something cool with Dark Pulse, follow your instincts on that one.